Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. Tonight, our guest is an Oxnard native, athletic basketball coach, assistant coach for a local university, as well as an alum for TEDx Oxnard. As you know, we had TEDx Oxnard participants join us this year to talk about the upcoming show that was earlier in the year. And now we get to have these one-on-one interviews. So look at the month of August as TEDx Alum Month. The rest of the month, we'll be speaking one-on-one with other participants of the TEDx team. So I am very excited to kick off the month of August, which is also my birthday month. So I am getting pretty old, so no old jokes as it may happen. But we'll be joining tonight with Brian Rosario, again, who is an Oxnard native, assistant coach for Pepperdine, as well as a TEDx alum. Brian, welcome to the show for a one-on-one. So this is all going to be focused on you. You don't have the rest of the team to help you. So I will go as easy as possible.
Please do, Daniel. It's been obviously a great run, and I just want to thank you for having us back. And I mean, looking forward to it. Now, when's your birthday? In August?
Tomorrow, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, happy pre-birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, 32, and it just feels like a whirlwind of different things have been going on. So it's been an interesting 32 years for sure.
Well, 32 is a great number. It's a great number. I know we'll get into it, but that was my number growing up. So
Really? Okay. So yeah, we'll definitely be getting into that. We have a lot of topics to touch in tonight's show. We'll be talking about you specifically, where you got your start at. You were born and raised here in the city of Oxnard. And we'll find out a little bit more about the schools that you attended. What did you participate in growing up? So let's first start off with your family, growing up in Oxnard, born and raised, your parents, any siblings. So we'll start there first.
yeah, so I was born and raised in Oxnard. I have two amazing parents. My dad was born and raised in Waipahu, Hawaii. He came to Oxnard probably by accident. He just he had an auntie and uncle living up here, and he flew into LAX, saw the bus to Oxnard, and he just came. And so that's how he got to Oxnard. And then my mom, she's from a great family. She was born in Ohio, but the family kind of migrated west, and she grew up in Santa Paula. And they met somewhere. They say a club, a dance hall, something was going on back then. And my dad, told a lame joke, but 50 years later, they're still married. I have one younger sister, Amy Rosario, and so Oxnard is our home. I mean, it's what we love. It's borderline is vacation for us. Anytime we can get back to the sea, but I'm very fortunate to have the family that I do, and kind of the culture, and we talked about it before, just the upbringing in Oxnard just produced so many family memories, but also friendships, and now it just continues with the work that I get to do.
That's amazing. Now, schooling goes elementaries, junior highs, high schools. The high schools is a big one for me. So your next question for high school is going to determine if this interview continues or it automatically ends. So we'll start with elementary. What elementary, junior high schools did you end up going to?
Yeah, so I was Santa Clara through and through. So I went to Santa Clara Elementary. I got to give a shout out to Miss Dottie Massa, who just retired. She was part of my education from the beginning. She was my first grade teacher, then became principal. So Santa Clara Elementary was kind of, it really built the foundation. And then I went on to go to Santa Clara High School.
Okay, then the interview will continue.
Good.
Because I thought you were going to end up saying like Channel Islands or something. Because I went to Wainimi. I'm a Viking, and So
Listen, I had a lot of friends that went there and we remained friends. So hopefully that this interview can remain as well.
No, of course. See, now I could be friends with you. There's no rivalry right there. But
That's right.
wow, that's pretty amazing to be in that education system all the entire time. And did you feel that being in that education system, that it was a benefit for you growing up, because the schools have values, those
Right.
those particular schools, and it's a religious values. Did you feel it was a benefit growing up versus what traditional public schools are?
Well, I'll be honest. I don't know what the other side is or what it represents. We were raised Catholic from day one. You can call me a cradle Catholic. So, from day one, it was all about the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith. Our parents. I mean, we were going to church from day one. So Santa Clara, both elementary and high school, it was kind of just what we were used to. I mean, as a kid, you don't know what the values, you don't know what the mission, you don't know any of that. What you know is just kind of the environment that you're in. Is it good? Is it bad? I mean, this is, as a fifth grader, all the way through, or a 5-year-old, all the way up to being a 14-year-old. But, what it created was lasting friendships. I'm dear friends with most of our class. I mean, Facebook, thank God, right, happened, and social media, because it allows you to continue understanding what those friendships have created and where they've gone. And then, going to Santa Clara was kind of a quote unquote business decision. I mean, I was a basketball player. So growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, if you were a basketball player, you wanted to go play for Coach Sianovich, and even when we were in elementary, we were going on Friday nights to go see the likings of, Sean Tarver, Stevie Amar, and Sasha Clement, all of those guys. I mean, they became our brothers and our mentors when we got to high school. So it started out as a quote unquote business decision with just wanting to be a basketball player. But it was just a streamline from elementary, and it was exactly what I needed personally, was just the environment that was healthy, the teachings and the values that obviously the church and my parents have taught my sister and I. But ultimately, it was just the perfect fit for me, in the sense of just the ability to understand who I was, but then kind of what I wanted to do in life.
Wow. Now, you mentioned Coach Sianovich, the late Coach Sianovich, who spent many, many decades at Santa Clara High School, even had a portion of the street by the school named after him, Coach C. Lane. How was that experience, being able to play under him after growing up and going to those games and watching that, and his style? How was that for you to be able to experience it as not as an attendee, but now as one of his players?
Yeah, going to the games when we were in elementary, I mean, Coach C was kind of this just mountain of a man that we were afraid of. I don't really get starstruck outside of probably athletes and coaches, and it started early for me. And I know we'll talk about this later in the interview, but going to Santa Clara, or deciding to go to Santa Clara, he was like, hey, listen, I want our newcomers, or our incoming freshmen, to go to camp together. And camp was actually at Pepperdine. So there's the full circle. I mean, I get to coach at Pepperdine now, but that was my basketball camp growing up. And that was our first kind of real sit down relational conversation with Coach C. Was just, he just wanted us to get better. And so from that moment, he was always this coach and this mentor and this person that, all of us, in terms of his basketball guys, we wanted to please, we wanted to work hard for, we wanted to listen. I mean, I remember Coach saying, listen, you got to get to bed at 9, you got to not drink Coke and Pepsi. And I listened. I was like, it was since high school that I just stopped drinking Coke and Pepsi because coach told me, I'm tired at 9 p.m. because coach said, listen, we got to go to bed so that we can get up and have all the energy. So, coach taught us how to be men. Coach created a brotherhood. Those older guys, when we were freshmen, the seniors, they took us under their wing because obviously it was a legacy piece. So, when you have a coach who has coached so long prior to us walking in and then so long after we left, I mean, you're part of a legacy, and so if there's one thing I remember about him, it's all the experiences that he created for us as just a bunch of guys and just a bunch of boys, with summer camps, driving buses and vans to Fresno State, Arizona State, and UNLV. And, it was such a cool dynamic in the summers that we are probably fortunate to have been under his teaching for that time, because, he really did teach us how to be part of a team.
Wow. After graduating from high school, did you keep in touch with Coach C after that? Turned to him for advice as you progressed through your years, because you also went to college and university as well.
Yeah.
Did you still look to him as a resource for information support system?
Yeah, well, to be honest, there was a little bit of a disconnect towards the end of my 4 years, simply because, there were so many good players, and I thought I was really better than what I was. And, I ended up playing football my senior year, and coach always supported that decision. And then, when I came back to basketball, he always had my locker there, and I was able to still be on the team. But that's the hard thing. Coach was very open and honest with where I was as a player, where I was trending towards. And I'm telling you, as a 17-year-old, you didn't want to hear it, and so, I personally, and this is kind of the, just the learning lessons that I've had is, I held that for a little bit, but then I got into coaching, and I kind of understood then, like, all of those things that he said, it's like, hey, you got to work on this, or Javon Baker's going to take your spot, or, you better work on your handle, or Paul Cervantes is going to, be playing over you. And he didn't understand that back in the day, and so then I became a coach, and then started recruiting kids at Santa Clara. And then all of a sudden, we started talking more. We kind of connected on a different level, which I was very fortunate to do. But, it's like the game brought us together. The game, obviously showed, where the strengths and weaknesses were, but then the game obviously brought us back together. And so we're very fortunate to have the game.
Now, you already mentioned it, full circle. Now, the training camps when you were a student at Santa Clara High School or as Pepperdine, and now you mentioned you are one of the assistant coaches at Pepperdine for the women's, and you deal with the recruitment for the teams. How has that experience been, that you continue to be around a sport that obviously you enjoy, and I don't know, maybe you may say love. I don't want to put those words in your mouth, but how is that feeling, that every day feels almost like not going to work, but just that you get to enjoy the game? Because clearly just this little part, it was a little bit of passion right there when you were just talking about the game. How has that been for you?
Well, the game has just opened up so many experiences. I went to the University of San Diego, and it just kind of presented itself where a dear friend of mine, Maggie Dixon, we were both on a boat just before freshman year, and it's called O Week, Orientation Week. And, she just kind of threw out the idea, listen, we practice against guys, and this is the women's team. And this was back when it wasn't cool for, guys to be practicing, for the program. And I said, yeah, this would be great. So just in that one moment, the game then became, a passion and a love that was kind of in its twilight. And all of a sudden, quickly, it just became a profession that I ended up deciding to do. And so, being hired at Pepperdine about 2 years ago, just it solidified kind of this full circle that the game in a beautiful sense is just it created all these experiences. So from living from San Diego in college, to then Louisiana, Kentucky, New York, back to LA, to the Midwest, to Arizona, and then now back in Malibu, just it is a little surreal. So that's the first thing. It's surreal. But to be able to work with young people, to be able to recruit them for basketball, but then once they decide to come to Pepperdine and we decide to go all into them, you get to mentor them in this really cool stage of life. If we all look back and, we sense that 18 to 22-year-old, that is a magical time. And we get to use the game of basketball in a way where we can shape their life, shape their viewpoints, shape their perspective on how to look at issues. No one told me how I should react to Coach C telling me the truth. And yet here, 20 years later, I get to really try to speak truth to our players so that they understand, like, here's the direction you want to go, or here's where we want to take your game. Here's where you have to develop as a person because you're a leader and you need to be leading our team. So it's just an amazing time for me, just because after 20 years of doing it, it's not about the wins and losses. It's really about those lives that we get to shape over a 4-year, 5-year period.
I want to ask you about that because, as you mentioned, you kind of touch from one end of the coast to the other end of the coast of the U.S. What were the experiences to be able to go from different sections of the U.S. And then ultimately come back to the area where you grew up in? You grew up in Southern California, and this is where you end up coming right back to 20 years down the line after visiting all of these different areas throughout the nation, to return back. So what was that feeling for you? What was that experience? And how did it feel that, like, didn't matter where you went, you were always going to be pulled back to this area?
Well, I don't know who said it, but I know we know that term, you can always go home again. And I was able to do it twice. So, my mentor down at San Diego, Kathy Marpy, I often tell this story because, she could have hired me at any time in the first 5 years of my professional life. Yet she had always said, you have to go off and become a coach. And so for 7 years, I'm just living out of California. It was an amazing experience in the sense of just living on your own, living in areas that, you probably wouldn't choose to live in, let alone drive through. But they were awesome places. Lake Charles, Louisiana, they get hit so often with hurricanes, but this community is tight. This community is close. It reminded me of the culture of where my dad's from, Hawaii, because it's all about family and food and laughter. And then I go up to Williamsburg, Kentucky. When I'm thinking I'm going to Williamsburg, Virginia, I hung that left in Knoxville. I'm like, what am I doing in Southeast Kentucky? Yet, the players we got to recruit, and, we turned that program, they were kind of hovering top 25. And in 4 years, we got them to be, top 10 consistently. And then, to be able to then move to Ithaca, New York, where, I didn't even have a thick jacket, let alone, gloves and all, but to live, in Ithaca and upstate New York, and to be part of the Ivy League. The Ivy League is an amazing conference. And, you don't get to do that often in your career, to be able to coach non-scholarship athletes where they are there for their education. And, playing a sport can get them there, but it really is a facilitation between the academic piece that they're there for, but then the athletic piece that has been part of their lives. So, then a decision was made. I came home. I came home to Loyola Marymount. I could have stayed at Cornell, but an opportunity created itself. I wanted to be back with family. I think we all get to the point where, you kind of see your parents as old for the first time, and you're just like, are they getting old, or is it me? You don't know. And so I wanted to get home for them. I wanted to get home for my grandparents, my sister. And so Loyola Marymount was was home for us, just because it was Los Angeles and it was in the conference that I knew. I watched Hank Gathers and Bo Kimball growing up. And so I was able to do that. And then, I met a girl, and she had an opportunity in Indiana. And so decided to go with her. We ended up getting married. We have two beautiful kids. And all of a sudden this migration back home happened where we had a stop in Arizona. I was able to become a head coach for the first time and really kind of do things on my own and test philosophies that, you kind of learn from a book. Sometimes you learn from others, sometimes you learn from doing, but, I was able to test some of those things. And then within a week, my wife and I both had opportunities to then come back home. Pepperdine for me, and for her, running a task force that can essentially eradicate AIDS by 2030. And within that week, we both said yes to home again. And so, all of those experiences within those 20 years, it's kind of surreal to be able to, drive through the valley. We're in Burbank, so drive through the valley, drive through Las Virgenes, and then that canyon opens up. And when you see that ocean, it's just like you're home, and every day I get to say that.
That is so true that you like paint that visual of seeing the ocean off Las Virgenes. I've made that drive a few times. I work for LA Metro, so I get to drive in the valley. And as well as I know, the temperature has been over 90 degrees for the past few weeks. A couple of times it hit 100, sometimes even more. As you were talking about the different areas that you were at, I can only think like, man, winter in California is still wearing shorts, a t-shirt, maybe some flip-flops, and walking around with no big deal. And then you move to the mid country, and then it's a little bit more humid. You might cover up a little bit more, and then going all the way to the East Coast, where winters are actually winters, which probably was a big shift for you, right?
So I interviewed in 2000 for McNeese. And at the time I had, my dad's hand-me-down. It was a 91 Ford Mustang, right? Convertible, perfect California car, right? Driving up and down PCH, going to school and back, it was perfect. But going out to Louisiana, interviewing, coming home, we literally went from the airport to the dealership because all they talked about was the amount of rain that comes and just the flooding. So ended up buying an F-150 with a shell. I was able to just throw stuff in there, but I had that F-150 for most of my career. Took that, obviously Louisiana back, Kentucky back, and then now to your point, to Ithaca. Now, one winter while in Ithaca, there were 36 inches of snow in 30 hours. And it was like the first time Cornell closed since like the 70s, just because there was just so much snow. Well, that F-150 was literally covered. Like I looked out, I could not find my truck. And that's what told me winters are a little different out here, right? And I didn't have a shovel. So I had to kind of let it thaw out a little bit, before I can get under. But that's just, getting back to California, then, that truck made it back and took the shot. And I kind of turned it into a California truck after that, promising we'll never go back to the snow where, you're going to be covered. I do talk to my truck because that's all there was for so many years. So.
Wow, that definitely has to be an experience to see your truck covered in snow and then have to wait for
it. It was gone. Like it was gone. Like there was no truck. And I'm just thinking, how do they get it out? And everyone's talking about shovels and ice picks. And I was like, I didn't have any of that. So I had to wait a few months before it thawed out completely.
Wow, months. That's crazy. So a good segue of you brought up was family. Married your wife, have two kids, I believe a boy and a girl, right?
Two boys.
Yeah, two boys. Sorry. Yep. So one question that I did ask you in the beginning was about your wife being a commander. And my first response was law enforcement or either military, but instead she actually had or has a very important role. And that role was even more important um, during this pandemic of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So, how was that for you and the family to know that your wife was in this position that played a very huge role?
Yeah, so she's an epidemiologist, so she studies infectious diseases. And so over her career, she has done a lot of different things within that. So she's gone to Africa to fight Ebola when that was an outbreak. She went for polio, yellow fever. She's worked on AIDS commissions. So when we were in Indiana, there was an outbreak of HIV and AIDS. So she worked on that. So this was kind of her wheelhouse. And as a basketball coach who teaches layups, right? I mean, she is doing the real work. And I always say I married up, and so, she's kind of the star of the family in the sense of just, she's able to understand what's important with the disease. When this outbreak happened, obviously there was a lot of just hustle and bustle, fear. And what epidemiologists do is they try to figure out where does it start, how is it transmitted, and then what are the best ways of remedies, so i.e. vaccinations and things like that. So last year was really the first time that I ever knew that our lives really came together, where her world of epidemiology, as we all went through about 19 months ago, I mean, the country was shut down, the world was shut down. It shut down sports, it shut down our school, our campus. So, we often look to her to just kind of help us through just understanding, what precautions should we have? And, a lot of friends still call me with just like the vaccination questions and, things like that. So, she's doing the real work. And like I said, her expertise right now is eradicating AIDS and HIV, which is a presidential commission over the next 5 to 10 years.
Now, what were the fear factors for you and the family? Your wife, she's dealing with, as you mentioned, trying to figure out the origin, figure out how it operates. Were there any of those fear factors, knowing that potentially she can get affected, bring it home to the family? I'm sure they have multiple layers on top of layers of precautions, but there are always those certain instances that something could happen.
Right. Well, it's always the transmission that's the fear, right? Like, how do you get it? How did you get it? If you were obviously contagious, but that's a little bit of what what she was able to do. I mean, she would work from home, so it wasn't like she had to get out there and do much. So our home became kind of a safe place. Obviously, we had some fear of extended family, my parents, her parents, our siblings, and then obviously the family at large, just everyone who is under the umbrella of family. So a lot of what, she helped educate us as a family was what we should be doing with just the hygiene, right? Washing the hands and making sure that, you do get vaccinated when the vaccine became available. Her side had 2 very close calls. Her uncle, ended up getting COVID, was hospitalized for close to 50 days and with ventilator and whatnot. So, fear becomes, more than fear when it hits your family. And I think that was the biggest thing that we've learned was, just in terms of society, it's not going to be fearful until it hits your family. And that's the thing, that's a little unique with society, that we got so fearful in the beginning, we shut down, and then all of a sudden we all started having like, cabin fever a little bit and not taking things to heart. And now we're close to another shutdown, where, if we don't control these numbers or really control the understanding of how it's, obtained and whatnot, I mean, it's going to lead to another something that none of us want, which is another quarantine time.
Now, I don't want to get her in trouble or anything, but through her research, were the information that was coming out from local governments, health officials, were they accurate to what she was seeing as needed precautions that needed to be taken, or did she feel that additional precautions needed to be taken that weren't being taken already?
Yeah. Well, when you listen to scientists from the start, well, actually be pre-pandemic, right? Like from the beginning of time, scientists have always stated the science of everything. So to answer your question, things were very in line. I mean, in terms of what was coming out, the precautions, kind of the tales, right? Like just how people are getting infected and whatnot. Those were all in line. The problem is, we made this pandemic a political thing, and science is not political. Neither is viruses and anything health related, which is why we do have a United States Public Health Service, which is servicing the public health that we don't think about. I mean, they are the first ones to go into Louisiana if there's a hurricane. They're the first ones that will go abroad to Africa to fight Ebola before it hits our shores. So that's not political. That is literally trying to keep the public safe. And I think what we all saw was this political chatter and messaging of something that should not have been political. So that was the frustration on her part, which is, we should be doing these things, wearing masks, staying socially distanced, which is not a hard thing to do, right? But when the messaging is starting to waver, and then now there's two messages, that's the frustration I think that she had along with her colleagues.
Now, how is it right now? We're hearing a lot about the Delta variant. It's spreading a lot more. It's actually, there's reports that it's actually going after younger children now. And there's still this continuation of this political realm of, is COVID real? Is COVID fake? Is vaccines effective? Are they not effective? What is her frustration level or feelings on where, at the end of the day, you kind of already mentioned it, the whole cabin fever aspect of it. A lot of people are kind of just over it. We've gone through extreme lockdowns and mild lockdowns and low lockdowns and then back to mild and extreme. So it's just push around and everybody's just think it's a game that's being played by those in power. And then you hear a lot of information coming about the vaccines, that it's going to cause birth defects. It's going to cause side effects that just have deformation of your body, and that it just destroys. One that I thought was funny, and I haven't heard any science talk about this, was that the vaccine was actually going to stop the reproduction system of a male. I've never heard any scientists say that, but that was something that I heard was going around. What is her feelings on people that are just kind of just throwing misinformation about that, about the vaccine, especially since she's been working on this for a betterment of almost 2 years, 18, 19 months?
Well, I think the closest word would be frustration. Because, before this pandemic, there's those who are pro-vaccine and then those who are anti. And that became, a thing just simply because, yes, there are so many vaccines that children are pumped with, but they're pumped with it for specific reasons. We don't have polio anymore because of that. We don't have smallpox for, what I mean? Like, we don't have these huge outbreaks with certain things because of it, because of vaccines. And so this is just the recent one where, this is a whole different virus. And whether you get into, the chatter of it was created in a lab or not, evolution of viruses happen. And so the Delta variant is just the evolution of this particular virus. And so if you're not controlling it by ways that we know, being vaccinated, wearing a mask, if not, staying socially distant, if not, I mean, if we're not doing those things, it will never be under control. And so there's that frustration that science has with just society, is because we can make anything political. And but we shouldn't make public health political, right? Because for every vaccine that's out there, it's got to go through some steps to make sure that we fully understand what this vaccine will cause versus what it enhances versus what it controls. So those are all things that obviously I think the science gets frustrated with, is just because one channel says one thing and then the other channel says another.
Yeah, I think it might be a good idea for people to just shut off their channels and no more TV and just listen to the scientists about it. That's where the best and most accurate information is going to come from. Well, thank you for sharing that information about your wife, though, and I thank her for doing the job that she does. Um, I can't imagine 24/7 just having this thing on your mind of constant that it's part of your job to be able to figure out this virus.
Well, I think it's so many layers, for public health officials, is just because there's so much out there. I mean, I'll give you a snapshot of how, just for her, she has to kind of maneuver through just, what she's dealing with. Is she was gone for 2 months helping with the unaccompanied children. That was obviously coming north from our southern border. And so again, the Commission Corps and the United States Public Health Service, I mean, these guys, this body is much like our servicemen, right? They're the first one in, last one out type of thing. And so even in a pandemic, she's being deployed out to Texas for 2 months, away from her family, away from her kids, to have to, manage something that's very political making, but it shouldn't be political because it's about human lives.
Exactly. Your two sons, I'm assuming they are following the same path as your parents took with you as far as education goes, Catholic schools, or are they doing public school?
Yeah, so we that honestly, they're so young. Our oldest just turned 4, so he's got one more year of kind of this preschool, right? And then our youngest he's the same month as you, so you guys are going to share a birthday month. He turns 2 on the 23rd, and so this is the conversations that we're having. Is how important is the Catholic school education at a younger age versus a high school age versus a college age? What kind of path do we want for them to have? Not that public school is not the answer, because that's, my wife is a product of public school. I'm a product of, private Catholic education, and we made it work. We're both very successful and raising 2 boys. So it is going to be a conversation for us. And we're doing our research now in the sense of the obviously city of Burbank where we live, and how those 2 tracks can really set up our boys for a great life.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And I didn't realize how young your kids were, but
we're late bloomers. We're just getting started.
But that's good though. That's good. My daughter, my oldest, she's 5. She'll be 6 in December. And then my youngest, my son, he'll be 4 in January. Nice. Although I would say that my daughter acts like a teenager already, so I am not looking forward to her teenage years. If it's anything like it is right now, I think it's going to be worse, but we'll see how that goes.
You can call me anytime, since I kind of know that high school, college frame of mind for the last 20 years. So.
I may just have to take you up on that offer to provide some support or something.
Totally.
So let's talk about TEDx. It was anybody who's familiar with TED Talks. This is kind of like a younger version of it, not younger, but a smaller version of the TED Talks that's more local, more to communities. And you got to participate in the first TEDx Oxnard that was put on by Patrick Alexson, who is a teacher at Santa Clara High School. How was that for you, and how have people reacted to your talk after?
Well, first of all, it was so surreal in the sense of being able to just stand on that red dot. I mean, TED, and then what now is TEDx in terms of all of these private yet licensed events under the TED umbrella. It is literally about a thought leader being able to share an idea that can really, their tagline, worth sharing, and so, to have an opportunity to be part of the first TEDx Oxnard event, it was so special. I mean, Patrick, the way we kind of connected was he's a teacher at Santa Clara, and I was a commencement speaker last year, and that's how it kind of connected. And I saw that there was going to be an event. I just wanted to inquire in terms of just kind of like what is it all about, because anything good coming to Oxnard, I wanted to learn about it and just kind of get to know. And that's how it kind of sparked. And so to be able to understand what that license means in terms of the event, but more importantly, the caliber of people involved to put on the event, to be spotlighted, to be able to, stand on that stage and on that dot, it was something that I never expected, yet kind of always was intrigued about. I think, being a coach and being a college coach at that, and being able to work with these young people, it's a special thing. And to be able to share just an idea that you see throughout your profession, is it worth sharing, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. And so the theme was code switching, and the interpretation of code switching that I took was just how we interact with our athletes, but also as parents, how we interact with our children. And so the story that I kind of told was the code switching that I learned from my dad through being an athlete, but also being his son, and how it really set this trajectory of me being a relational coach, and really wanting to ensure that the relationship amongst me and my players is something that they can count on for the rest of their lives. And that takes a lot of time. And so some of the feedback that I got was very unexpected, from all different levels. Obviously my coworkers and, my close friends, they just loved it, just because I think their buddy was on stage or their friend was on stage. But then it kind of went deeper, where recruits, their parents, extended family, coaches that, I never thought that they would spend 11 minutes with me, kind of made a comment of, what you said really is something that we got to go back to.
Wow, that's amazing. Is there any future plans for doing another TEDx, whether it's here in Oxnard or anywhere else? Because I believe there's one in the Valley as well. Have you been approached to do another TEDx, or what are the plans moving forward with that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I've always wanted to. I was asked this just a week ago, what's your why? And I really want to make sure the next generation has mentors like I had, at any point of their life. Now, granted, I am the older guy, right? I'm 44. I know I'm young, but like, I'm becoming now in that realm that, is that age group of mentorship. Like, most of my mentors were about 15, 20 years ahead of me. And they've always looked back, and they always wanted to kind of reach out their hand and help me take a path that is, yes, least resistant, but most rewarding. And that's what I want to create for the next generation. And so I haven't specifically been approached by other TEDx events, but, being able to, feel what it means to be able to just share experiences and sharing ideas, and kind of what that ripple effect does, for other people, specifically that next generation. That's kind of that fuel and the passion, and kind of that fire in me right now is how do we create opportunities where, whether it's myself or people I know that have great messages, can share with that next generation. Because as we all know, I mean, the one person telling us, sometimes we become a little immune to it, and just kind of deaf to it. And so if we can all share an experience, but it's all tied into something very specific, those are the kinds of events that I want to be part of and possibly even create.
That's beautiful. One of the things was that I actually watched all of the performance, all of the speakers the day of the event, and each one brought something that was extremely powerful. That a couple of them I teared up on because they were so relatable. And to hear you even just say right now that you want to be part of those meaningful events, it definitely is true that you participated in TEDx Oxnard, the very first one. And as I hear, it's the one of many to follow. It sets a certain standard. And to know that an Oxnard native was able to share their story that so many of us here in Oxnard experience, whether it's an athlete or not an athlete, was extremely powerful. So I think it's great. I hope the next series of TEDx is you get to join again, or any other TEDx. But your message and your story is definitely a powerful one, and it's a beneficial one, and of course the other speakers as well. So awesome to all of you guys for doing that.
No, thank you. And I think that's the very unique thing, is to be able to stand on a stage in your hometown, a town, a culture, a group of people, a village that helped raise you. I would love to be able to share more on what Oxnard meant to my upbringing and just my trajectory, because, talking with those friends, that I talked about it earlier, these group of friends that, we're kind of like ups and downs and, just through it all, that we've always said that, a lot of people didn't expect kids from Oxnard to leave Oxnard and be successful. And if there's things that we want to do and we want to try to give back to, is really just to be a mirror to that next generation, saying, you can do this, you can leave Oxnard. I know Oxnard seems big, and being able to drive up that grade is like a faraway land, and it's all new on the other side, and obviously getting down into LA or going north. I mean, it could be scary for some, and they don't know. It's not just about an education that gets them out of Oxnard. It's about a life that they can have beyond that education. I mean, a lot of us do get to go home, but home's represented in what the pursuit can be, and what the pursuit is for each individual person.
Absolutely. Brian, any final words you want to just share as we wrap up tonight's show? So I hope you don't feel that it was too tough. I felt like it was a pretty good interview, very quick. Any final words that you want to share tonight?
Well, Daniel, first of all, I want to just thank you for having a platform. I think, that one of the things that for again, an Oxnard native is always looking back home to kind of see how it's going. And you don't know until you're kind of in the realm. I mean, to be able to, share a story of a kid from Oxnard becoming what he wanted to become because of the people that was around him, and to be able to be so close now to Oxnard is a special thing. And I think part of what I would say is that, anyone listening, be proud of home, be proud of Oxnard. And I know most times when you talk about the 805, it is Oxnard that you talk about, even though it's Central Coast. I get it. My mom's was in the telephone world, so she knows all about, area codes and all that. But I think it's, we have a special place. It's not Ventura. It's not Camarillo. It's not up the coast to Santa Barbara. It's not Thousand Oaks. We have a very unique city that is strong. And I think we've we've had strong leadership. We need more strong leadership coming up the ranks and getting on that bench. And we need more voices like yours, Daniel, to kind of tell the story of Oxnard. We do have the ups and downs. We've had Olympians. We've had many, teachers of the year being recognized, not only with the United States Chamber of Commerce, but the local Chamber of Commerce. We have strong business. We have an amazing agriculture that is literally felt coast to coast. And so I think if there's one thing, it's one, be proud of who we are, be proud of where you're from. But if there's one thing that I would want to stress more than that even, is give back. Give back to the city, give back to the people that helped you along the way, because that's the only way to do it.
Wow, thank you for that. Because definitely, when people hear Oxnard, it's funny to me. I don't really get that anymore, but growing up, I used to get the responses when they ask me, where do you live? I'm like, oh, Oxnard. And the response is always like, oh, it's like, no, it's not bad. It's good.
Yeah.
The reputation that it has, it's like, no, that's not who we are. We're actually a great city with great people. Yeah, we have a few bumps in the road, but it's a great city, like you were mentioning right now. And definitely people need to give back to the community. I give back to my community through my advocacy and through this platform to be able to highlight the different areas of our city, the different services, the different organizations, the different individuals that all contribute to the Oxnard community without people really realizing that these individuals and organizations contribute. Again,
Well,
thank you.
I'll say one thing. I'm sorry, but I think the perfect example of the greatness of the city is probably, and I don't even know mileage, but it's probably a quarter of a mile. When you pass those two towers on the left, going north, then you pass the collection, and then you pass towards the left again, the new wagon wheel, where there's so many, apartments going up and just housing. That glimpse right there tells you that business is good, people are coming, they're wanting a place to live, and that so that project is bringing people in from the outside. And I think that's something that, when we were growing up, you didn't have a lot of that, and so I regret that the one is now not going through downtown anymore, but I think that's a great stretch of Oxnard that just showcases the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It does paint a different picture than what people have about Oxnard. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Rosario, Oxnard native, athletic coach, TEDx alum, overall great guy. Thank you again for joining us. Be sure to join us next week as we have Rabbi Mac Locker join us, and as we find out how a physicist turns into a rabbi, which is a very interesting story. We'll be learning about his early days as a physicist and then moving into becoming an ordained rabbi and even giving back to the community here in Ventura County. That's all going to be right here on Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. And remember, all live and 100% real. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.